Hello gin lovers and welcome back to No Nonsense Gin Reviews with me, Bobby Freeman. Now then, one of my subscribers, Nathan Hunt, has been in touch and he has asked if I would do a video all about the different types of gin. So Nathan, I have accepted your challenge, I've picked up the gauntlets, let's dive straight in here and see if we can clear this matter up for you. Now, you might think that is a simple question, but to be honest, it's not until you actually delve into it, you realise it's slightly more complex than you perhaps first realise. So I've divided the gins into what I think is correct, which is 5 categories, and we're going to list them for you here today. So then, category number 1 is of course the London Dry Gin. Now, London Dry Gin is whatever you would think as gin generally today. Anything that's in the mainstream, in the shops, in the bars, that is going to be London Dry Gin. It is by far the most popular. I think about 90% probably of the gins that are out there are going to be London Dry. So everything you see here, pretty much everything you see around me, I'd say almost all these gins are London Dry, with the exception of a few, which we'll go into later. But I've selected these little fellows here because these are the ones you're going to see most regularly around the world, and probably some of my favourites as well. So you've got your Sipsmiths, your Beefeaters, your Tanquerays, and your Plymouths. So wherever you are in the world, I'm pretty sure you will have seen or heard of these fellas because they are ubiquitous. They are everywhere, and that's why I've chosen them to talk about and sort of demonstrate what is a London Dry today. And one thing to remember with London Dry is don't let the name fool you, because just because it's called a London Dry doesn't mean it has to be made in London. That's just the style of gin, the way in which they distilled it. So ABV wise, London Dry has to be between 37.5 up, and it usually goes up to around 43, 44, maybe 45. It doesn't usually go higher than that. In fact, when it gets to 57, it then becomes, a name which I really like, a Navy strength gin, which basically just means it's gin that is 57% ABV. But however, if you go higher than that, it then becomes just high strength gin. And I don't think I've got any higher than that. I don't think I've ever tried. Certainly not here. I don't think I've ever tried any, to be honest. And to be honest, if you are drinking anything above 57%, then good luck to you. I'd like to shake you by the hand because you are a better man than me. So whenever you order a gin in a bar, it can almost guarantee it will be a London Dry, because that is generally what we call gin these days. So, section 2, and this is where things start to get interesting, because this is the fruit gin section. And as you can see, there is literally a plethora of fruit-based gins on the market today. And this is just like a tiny 0.1% of what you can get out there. Because basically, I think London Dry Gin has been around for so long now. And then gin started very recently to become extremely popular. So I think someone thought to themselves, you know what, I'm a bit bored of making London Dry. Let's pep things up a notch, shall we? And pep they did, my friends, because basically they've just gone mad. I don't think there is a single flavour in the world where you cannot get a gin in that variety. So for an example here, we've got lemon gins here, we've got blackberry gin, you've got just generic red berry gin there, you've got orange gins here, you've got strawberry gins, you've even got a nettle gin over here. So as you can imagine, there is literally no rules about what flavour you can make the gin. It's kind of opened up the market to people who perhaps weren't that keen on gin. Perhaps they find it a little bit harsh, a little bit bitter. If you fall into that category, then one of these gins is probably a great way to sort of ingratiate you, ease yourself in sort of rather gently, and then perhaps move on to the London Dries once you've tried and got used to these. Now, technically, these are all still London Dries, but they just happen to be really strong in whatever flavour they have chosen. And you'll also find that, generally speaking, the fruity gins are going to be a little bit weaker. Not by much. You won't get anything. Most of the time, they're below 40%. You might get some that pop up. I think this one's still 43. Yeah, that's 43, the Whitley Neal. But mostly, they're going to be down below the 40, languishing down there. But they will not, however, they will never drop below 37.5 ABV, because then, technically, they cannot call them a gin anymore. In fact, if they do drop below 37.5, they actually drop into a different category, which we're going to talk about later. Okay, section 3, and I'm very excited about this one, because we are now, ladies and gentlemen, advancing into the realms of Old Tom. Now, as you can see, there's not so many bottles here, because this is more of a kind of a niche market, and maybe not so much niche, but more of an undiscovered market, I'd say, because not too many people know what Old Tom is yet, or what it is all about. And that's where I come in, my friends, because I bloody well do, so listen up. So, Old Tom is basically a stepping stone between the London Dry, which we talked about earlier on, and the original spirit, which is called Geneva, which gin was born from, which came over from Holland in the early 18th century. So it basically ties the two together. There was a period in between the Geneva and the London Dry when Old Tom was king, and that was all that everybody drank. And essentially the difference between this and the London Dry is, it's pretty simple really. It's basically just a slightly sweeter recipe, but it's more of a sort of a viscous sweetness to it. It's kind of bordering on the realms of almost, I want to say, kind of I want to say kind of caramelly, but don't go that far. Think caramelly, but then draw it right back to like 1%. And that kind of gets you to what Old Tom tastes like, in my opinion anyway. Truth be told, it's actually kind of a guilty pleasure for me. I mean, in fact, to be honest, it's not even a guilty pleasure, it's just a pleasure. I don't care who knows. Let it be known that I, Bobby Freeman, enjoy Old Tom. And there's nothing you can do about it. My neighbours love me. And also, I love the history of this gin, because during the gin craze in London in the 18th century, when gin was like a really big problem, it was incredibly cheap, and it was like the drink of the masses, and the masses did not shy away. They drank loads of it, and they were getting wasted all day long, all night long, whenever, at any hour of the day, they were on the gin. And until recently, it's having a little kind of it's just starting to, the first green shoots of a revival are starting to poke their way through, I think. So in fact, my top prediction is Old Tom is going to be the next big thing in gin, because the market is becoming very saturated at the moment. It's so popular. There are so many gins around. As I told you with the London Dry, there's so many different sorts. I think people are perhaps looking for something a little bit new, a little bit different, and I reckon Old Tom is going to fill that gap. Alrighty then, it's time for section 4, and that's the American gin. Yeehaw! So American gin is a bit of a strange section really, because it's not that different from the original London Dry gin that I spoke about earlier. It's just slightly different, and I think it just about deserves its own category. So essentially the main difference is it's slightly weaker on the juniper and slightly stronger on the other flavours. So in a way you could argue it's moving further away from what gin is, but it still remains most definitely a gin. And there's actually not too much of it available here in the UK. So the only one I have in my collection is of course the good old Aviation American Gin. Owned, of course, by the very famous actor Ryan Reynolds, who very kindly retweeted a link to one of my reviews to his 14 million followers. So thanks, Ryan. You're the best. And in fact, this was the first gin I ever tried without tonic, because I always used to drink gin with tonic. I'd never tried it with anything else when I started this channel. But when I did the review of this, someone actually put a comment in the section saying you should not be drinking that with tonic, because blasphemous, and you are a fool to do so. So I heeded his advice, and I tried it without the tonic. Stupidly, I did put ice in the glass, which then made me look like a fool, because technically it was then on the rocks, but not neat. But you know, I've dealt with that in a previous video. Please feel free to go and abuse me like many other people have. But anyway, the point was I tried it without the tonic, and it was a real revelation for me. It was kind of an opening of my eyes to how another way to enjoy gin. It's a real special gin, this one. It's very sort of, as I say, less on the junipers, but it's very sort of up on, that kind of lets the other flavours shine through with the citrus of the orange peels and the coriander and the cardamom and stuff like that. And I really like it. It's just something special, and this is about my third bottle, I think now. It's not the gin I reach for every single time, but when I'm in a slightly funny mood, a slightly American mood, which happens from time to time, at the start of this section, for example. In fact, I actually did an American gin special when I was visiting the US earlier this year, so have a look back. I'll put a link in the section below. There's going to be a lot of links to all these gins in the section below, but have a look particularly at the American one, because I try a few American gins over there, and again, I tried them all neat and with tonic, and they all tended to work better neat for me. So have a look at it, see what you think, and get the old laughing gear around some old American gin. Now, I don't think I've used the phrase laughing gear since about 1993, so I have no idea why that came out of my head then, but that, you know, that is the kind of crazy and unpredictable thing that can happen on this channel. See what I mean? Right, so fifth and final section, and this is a bit of a wild card, because this is the gin liqueur. So the reason I say it's a wild card is that not many people really tend to drink it. You don't really see this in bars. You tend to just see it more in shops. It's kind of bought as sort of Christmas presents and that sort of thing. So what exactly is gin liqueur, I hear you ask? Well, I shall tell you, my friends. Essentially, it is still gin. It's distilled in the same way. However, it is infused with a huge amount of flavours, usually fruit, but it can be anything, to be honest. And as a result, it is a lot sweeter, and that means the ABV drops down to below that threshold of 37.5%, which I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the fruit gins. So when it drops below 37.5, it can no longer be sold as gin. It has to be called and sold as a gin liqueur. So, for example, I have the Edinburgh Plum and Vanilla Liqueur here for you, and this one is 20% ABV, so way down below what a lot of those fruit gins were, and certainly a lot lower than the London Dries. So essentially what that lower ABV does is make it a lot more drinkable and a lot more user-friendly. So if you're perhaps someone who's new to gin, or perhaps even new to alcohol full stop, then it might find, if you want to get into gin, you might find that this is a great way to ingratiate your way first, even before you go to the fruit gins, because it's certainly a lot more drinkable and won't knock your socks off. In fact, I can personally guarantee your socks shall remain on throughout any drinking of any gin liqueur. So I actually find it's most enjoyable to drink gin liqueur neat. Now, that's quite uncharacteristic for me, because apart from the American gins, I said they are quite nice neat, but they are still pretty harsh. Certainly, majority of the gins I drink, the London Dries, I never ever have it neat. A lot of people say to me, you should be drinking this neat, you should be drinking this neat. And, I do endeavour to try it neat now in some of my more recent videos, but this little fellow is perfect neat. Because that alcohol level is much lower and the sweetness is much higher, it's just much more enjoyable and much more intense as a neat drink. So my top tip, if you are going to try some of this, then do drink it neat, my friends. So there we have my 5 types of gin. Once again, thanks very much to Nathan for suggesting the video. If you've enjoyed it, then don't forget to press the like button and subscribe to my channel and press the little bell icon so you get notified when all my new videos come out. And I will see you all next time on No Nonsense Gin Reviews, where I shall be Bobby Freeman. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.